Hi, this is Professor Hirona Matayoshi here at Yokohama National University. My paper is about pedagogy runs curriculum that runs the world. Desirable pedagogy and pedagogical curriculum. When designing curriculum, one must understand the concept of perception over perspective. Perception is basically the provided cognition, whereas the perspective is the whole picture. When establishing a curriculum, it's kind of like establishing a nation in a world, but in a tiny perception. But when you consider the perspective, it's a wider picture. Hence, when we established our homeroom curriculum, the system and the quality, pedagogy, the department cooperation, educational atmosphere, it's kind of like a team. That's how you would see it. Whereas the perspective, on the other hand, is the depopulation, survival skills, global cooperation, nation as a team. And so the concept of homeroom is basically kind of like what a government is all about, right? And so education is just a smaller version of that government. It's a smaller version of establishing resources or human resources that can collaborate and that can establish the quality and to represent our nation as well. And so that's one of the reasons why homeroom is very important. However, to establish education, you have to understand that we have to have cooperation with the high schools, for instance, recruitment, and that's something that all schools in Japan pretty much do. In Japan, teachers are required to establish their collective skills through communication with the local community as well as the global community. Each college or university has their own way to recruit students, especially professors in private schools, because it's a private business. When you consider business education, for example, a university is just like a big, huge department store, and professors are basically the stores, the individual stores within. And so if you have this department store, for example, it's kind of like working to sustain a bigger picture. But that's one of the reasons why I'm talking about this whole concept of the perception, that we recruit students from top high schools to assure the quality of education for the institution, and that is in itself the perspective. In the following slide as a sample recruitment template that is used in most universities, especially private and also national university. Now, as you can see in the sample, there are two sides. The right-hand side is the original Japanese. The left-hand side is my translated version of how we do this. What we do is we make reservations to talk with them. Hence, they are able to look at their students and see what their students' needs are, and we can also verify what we can provide. What happens is like any other high school, once they graduate college, sometimes they do return back to the high schools, and when they do, they talk about their achievements. You know, they graduated. They're now working here, for example. And by doing that and making kind of like a connection with the students, then the high schools are capable of locating which schools are safe. And to talk about the homeroom in this video, I'm going to talk about the homeroom itself, so that's the good education. In the paper, I will discuss the negatives of propaganda, for example. But let's talk about first, the positives. And the positives are very simple. Establishing a homeroom has to do with basically controlling quality. We have 5 departments: the education, economics, management, and physics and urban science departments in our university, and the International Strategy Organization Division, English division, basically controls the English education for all 5 departments. Hence, when you have students come in, they're coming in from so many variety of high schools, and not all high schools are great too, like I discussed with you before. You have to make sure. And so some are very good and some are not. And so that's one of the reasons why you have to sift out what you have, the pupils that you have, and find out who needs reskilling. When you find the reskilling students, you put them into the homeroom to reskill them so that they would be able to be as equal as the top-notch students. Okay, that's why these homerooms are very, very important. And therefore, we have these independent English homeroom to make sure that these students are reskilled for those who have under TOEFL score 500. And anybody above that, well, basically anybody above 550, we provide them with waivers so they don't have to take the English courses and they can basically concentrate on their majors. However, there are students who want to continue learning English. Well, then they take English courses, and that would be below 600 courses or anything above 550 courses. Okay. On the bottom part, we talk about the free schedules. These are modules for events. So, for instance, when classes are happening, you've got the education, economics, and all the 5 departments having their classes. You have slots that are not necessarily functioning. So you have like courses that have been canceled, for example. Yeah, we have those time slots. Within those time slots, instead of wasting them, they should be used for reskilling, right? And so we basically use these slots and we find the slots and put them in to the schedule so that different departments can schedule their own homerooms as well as their own events so that they can reskill the students and produce better opportunities for the students, especially if they're looking for work, for example, have sessions that can accommodate vocational choices, for example. Now, in terms of grading systems, it's probably very different and from everybody around the world, but the GPA is basically how it's done. But the GPA is calculated a little bit differently from abroad because in Japan we have this S mark. It's not. It's basically superior, is what it means, and it's like 90 to 100%. And then we have the A, B, C, and the F. We don't have D's. D's are basically F. As you can see, there's inference, which is reading between the lines. The S is hardly given. The student has to prove that they have excelled the expected content, that they have to go beyond the content that they learned in course, and so they have to prove that, and that's one of the reasons why we can hardly provide a student with an S mark. As for the triangle basically means yes, we are pretty much allowed to provide that, but again, they have to prove it. The double circled means good job, yeah, go ahead, give them this grade, no problem at all, kind of thing. Whereas you have just the circle itself, the one-lined circle, just it's acceptable. The schools are pretty much happy with that, but schools are very not happy if you provide any kind of unacceptable grade. So the choices that we do have is A, B, C, and as you can see, it's very small. So if you're wondering, about transcripts in Japan, yeah, they're kind of wishy-washy. Let's look at the broader perspective. Now, the broader perspective of this homeroom theme is, in terms of events, is you have the mandatory courses and the classes, and to reskill the students with a variety of skills. So, every skill that you want to provide students with control so that it's not embarrassing when they graduate and go into their future endeavors. Like I discussed, the whole concept, the whole aim, the whole goal is the quest to learn through pursuing curiosity and to make sure that the students get that. Okay, and that's one of the reasons why the score, the S score, for example, the mark, is that they have to prove that they have excelled beyond the content of the class. That's one of the reasons why we have this homeroom, is to make sure that they do excel. And it's kind of like motivational background so that they get a chance, Number 2, exploring the acquired knowledge of the inquisitive mind, providing the education with other courses, and to establish future practitioners reskilled and prepared to be independent. Quality control, assurance is everything. And homeroom is that concept where everybody has that shared information, and that shared information will allow them to keep them tech savvy with skills so that they can pursue their independence in the future. Because the whole concept, for instance, AI, digital money, banks, for example, students have to be, ready. Also, the homeroom will also provide emergency notifications. The students will be ready, and we'll be able to give them the information and the good information. Other things with the homeroom is also to provide university students with job opportunities within the university. It's basically to provide them with quality jobs. NTAs are not just for international students, but also for Japanese students as well. Okay. Conversing, collaboration with different nationalities, and to be able to aspire for better opportunities. Now, as you can see, like they will be doing like grammar checking, helping students doing their reports, for example, and this will assist them, in the future, for example. Like running a world curriculum or running a university curriculum is no different, really. It's just a bigger version of it. It's the perspective. And that's something that I would discuss inside the paper. But I also, in the paper, would discuss the negatives about the problems of education when controlling the world, for example. There's positive and negative, and the positive education is like I discussed and introduced to you, dealing with homeroom, providing opportunities for the students, right? Whereas the negative side is very different. So let's look at, again, producing institution to sustain the student pride and prestige, to achieve their dreams, to provide them with credentials, and degrees for eternity, right? That's the whole purpose of education. But in terms of propaganda, it's a completely different thing. And it's basically producing the institution to sustain their own business bank accounts, ignoring credentials, rearranging faith to control members' dreams to sustain the organization, making members conform to affinity for eternity, which basically happened in Japan. With the infiltration of the LDP, for example, with cult intentions. That actually did happen. Well, this is kind of like showing how it was done inside the paper, and I would talk about how it was done in Japan and how it's been basically done abroad too as well, so that you see a bigger picture of how perspective can be changed to the worse. But I will also discuss how it can be reversed inside the paper. And I do talk about the Japanese version, the revised fundamental law of education, which basically took away the power of education. It basically took away the power of the professors, what recently I found that it was happening in the United States as well, which is 1776 curriculum, which was rearranged from the original here in Japan. And I do discuss how it was done with algorithms that are basically business algorithms, and Rowland's Hall-Eidma marketing step process, and also Alex Fickney's Osborne Scamper marketing method and step guide. These were used, and you can see the word rearranged on the bottom. Yeah, but like I said before, perception cannot be changed, or if it does, it's very difficult, because perception is based upon childhood education, right? So education is not innate. Education is learned. So you're not born with the education. You are born in the quality to attain the education. People can be either educated positively or negatively. And perception is a very, very difficult thing. And that's very difficult to change once a person has been educated. However, perception can be changed over time, and that's the whole purpose of education, and also universities, to change, to give a new version, to give a third dimension of not a two-sided coin, but another possibility. And to understand algorithms is very important, because if you understand these algorithms and you understand what's happening to you when faced with this conundrum in life, and that is something that I will talk about inside the paper, so that you can see how it was done, and so you can prevent it from happening in your countries as well. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoy my paper. This was Professor Hirona Matayoshi.